So the iPhone XS Max has been out for a little over a week now, and I have a few things to say about it. First, let's start off with the things I don't like about it so far. It's nothing major, but there are a few minor annoyances that you may want to hear. The first thing I'm unhappy with is I have been having some issues with the phone as far as connecting my AirPods. Every so often my AirPods will disconnect for no reason, and they'll start jumbling around a bit until I have to disconnect them and then reconnect them all over again, which is pretty annoying. Doesn't happen all the time, but throughout the workday will happen, say 2 or 3 times a day, and that does get in the way a little bit. Now again, that's nothing to stop you from buying the phone, but it is pretty aggravating if you do have a pair of AirPods and you don't want them disconnecting. That has happened to me. Now, I don't know if that's a widespread issue, but so far with this phone, when I'm using it, I do have that problem. Of course, this could just be a software issue with iOS 12, maybe something that can be updated in the future. But as far as right now, there's no new updates for it. No one else seems to be speaking about it, but this is happening to me, and I don't like that so much. The second thing I'm not very happy with is the front-facing camera. For years, I've been very unhappy with how Samsung has used the front-facing camera, where it looks like it's put a bit of makeup on your face, and I never really liked that. I always liked how the iPhone camera showed your true face. If you had any blemishes on there, it was going to show those. But this year in the iPhone XS Max, Apple seems to be doing the same exact thing, where they're masking your face with some sort of makeup, and there's no way to turn that off. There's no beauty mode or anything. It's just how the front-facing camera is. And I've looked online, and a lot of people are having that same issue. So I'm very unhappy with that. It just kind of ruins the front-facing camera for me. I don't take a lot of selfies personally, but when I do take a selfie, I don't want it to look like I have some kind of makeup on my face. I'd rather it show my true face. I'm fine with that. Now, for some people, that's probably not a huge issue. They don't mind the makeup look, but for me, that does kind of get on my nerves a little bit. So I'd rather not be that way. Hopefully with a software update, Apple can change that, where we can take off this, I guess, semi-beauty mode in the camera, and we can have our true face again. The last thing I'm not very happy with is the phone doesn't seem to have any sort of wow factor, where there's nothing new about this phone that makes you say, man, I have to have that phone, as opposed to last year's phone. If you went from the iPhone 7 Plus to the iPhone 10, that was a huge jump. You know, it was an edge-to-edge display. Even though there's a little bit of a notch in there, it didn't seem to be too bad for the notch because you had all that screen. For this though, coming from the iPhone 10 to the iPhone XS Max, there's not much change besides a bigger screen. Now, having the bigger screen, of course, isn't a bad thing, but when that's the only change that you can outwardly see from the iPhone 10 to the iPhone XS Max, it doesn't seem to be so much, and it really doesn't make it seem like it's worth the money. Now, enough harping on the things that I don't like. Let's talk about some of the things I really do like about this phone, and that's first starting with the speakers. The speakers on this phone are fantastic. Sometimes I think they're too loud. I mean, the sound is great. It's very punchy. The bass is good. You can feel it vibrating in the phone when you do play something out of the speakers. I love that. When watching a movie or playing a song just straight through the speakers, it's very clear, very crisp. The bass is very good. So the speakers are an A+ for me, even upgrading from the iPhone 10, which I thought had really good speakers. But the iPhone XS Max takes it to a new level, and I really love the speakers in this phone. Another thing I really do like, and I know I was just talking about this as a bad thing, but the big screen is very, very nice. I love the larger screen on the iPhone XS Max. I feel like watching a movie on it, watching a video. I watch a lot of sports, or watching the NFL games or highlights or anything on the phone looks fantastic. The big screen looks absolutely phenomenal. It's crisp and clear. The larger screen size and the resolution of the screen looks very good when you're watching things, especially that have HDR. The colors really come out. The phone shows it very, very well. So even though I don't like that the only thing upgraded really from the outward look of this phone is the size, the actual size of the phone is great. And I do like that a lot. So far using this phone, there are a few things I've noticed that are really beneficial to me in my everyday usage, especially like the RAM. I have noticed that the RAM in this phone seems to be a lot better than the iPhone 10. There's some apps that I'll have open and I'll forget I even had them open till the next day when I come back to use the phone, especially YouTube, and I'll still be on the same exact video that I was watching yesterday that I forgot I was watching in the first place. So I do really like that. The RAM management in this phone seems to be a lot better than the iPhone 10, because with the iPhone 10, if I open 2 other apps, I sometimes have to close the ones that were there before. Now, I don't know if this is a product of iOS 12. I didn't get to use iOS 12 so much in the iPhone 10 because it was not very long before I got the iPhone XS Max. So far though, with the RAM management in the iPhone XS Max, I feel like it's much better than it was in the previous phone. And that is a really big upgrade because it does affect the everyday use for me with this phone. Now, I could just be being prisoner of the moment, but apps do seem to open a little quicker on this phone than they did on the previous phone. Of course, we know the processor is better on paper, but in everyday use, I do seem to be getting better performance out of opening certain apps and moving around in them a little bit faster than I could on my iPhone 10. Now, of course, I haven't done a side-by-side comparison on them like with everyday use while I've been using this phone, but just from my eye to this phone, it does seem to be moving a little bit faster, which is good news as well. The rear-facing camera on this phone is great, especially the portrait mode. Now, I don't use it that often, but when I do use it, the pictures come out phenomenally. I've taken some test photos with it just to test it out and using the background blur and changing that in and out, and it's wonderful. Now, of course, that's something you use every so often, and you may not notice that much of a difference on it from last year's phone. But for me, actually looking into the detail of the pictures from using my iPhone 10 to the 10s Max, especially on the portrait mode, the pictures on the 10s Max are much better. So kudos to Apple for actually upgrading the camera in a significant way on this phone. The battery on this phone has been noticeably better as well. I am getting more time in the day than I did on my iPhone 10, and I do keep the phone on maximum brightness on both phones. And this phone does seem to last a little bit longer, which is good even with the bigger screen having it on max brightness. I'm getting more time each day with the battery. I use wireless charging a lot, especially while I'm at work or while I'm in the car. Now on the iPhone 10, wireless charging was a little bit slow. On this phone, it is a bit faster, which is good, especially with the bigger battery. Even while I have the screen on while I'm wireless charging, it does seem to charge pretty quickly. The last little thing I want to touch on is Face ID. Now it does seem to be a little bit faster than it should be with the A12 Bionic chip. It's not super fast. You still have to look at it and swipe up to unlock the phone, which takes a little bit of time, but it does recognize my face a little bit faster and from different angles than my iPhone 10. Now keep in mind, there are a few things of course about this phone that I could nitpick either good or bad, but I don't want to do that. I want to base this off things that I use every single day that affect me while I'm using the phone, not just things that you can look at on a sheet of paper and say, well, this is better or this is better. I don't want to do that. I base the phone off of how I use the phone every single day and how things work for me. Now that's just a few of the things I've noticed with the phone after using it for a week and some of the good and bad things I've dealt with so far while using it. So if I have to sum everything up and decide whether or not this is worth it over the iPhone 10, I'd have to say no. I don't feel like the phone does enough to require an upgrade from last year's iPhone 10. But if you're coming from say the iPhone 7 Plus or even the iPhone 8, this may be a worthy upgrade. Having edge-to-edge display is beautiful, but if you're used to having it on the iPhone 10, it's not that big of a wow factor. So if you have an iPhone 10 and it's working just fine for you, you just spent $1,000 on that or close to it, and you don't feel like you need to upgrade, you'll do just fine skipping this phone and waiting for next year's phone. But if you have an older iPhone, you're looking to upgrade and you want the best and the newest, then the iPhone XS Max is the way to go. You have a beautiful screen, the speakers are really good, the camera's really good. You can't go wrong with this phone if you're coming from an older iPhone, except the iPhone 10 that is. But that's just my take on it. Of course, if you like this video, feel free to give it a thumbs up. If you love this video, feel free to subscribe. But until next time, it's been my pleasure. Peace.